we are in the middle of a ton of political news with a bunch of GOP wannabes challenging Trump for the nomination, Trump's four indictments and upcoming trials, the Republicans going after Hunter Biden. And what are we going to talk about today on the Lean to the Left podcast? Rock and roll and time traveling back to the 90s, plus a little bit of baseball and other sports, and some politics. So stay with us.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people, some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Great to have Andy Frye with us today. Andy's the author of the novel 90 Days in the 90s, a rock and roll time travel story. Andy's written for Rolling Stone, ESPN, and other publications, and currently writes about sports business for Forbes. Over his career, Andy's interviewed hundreds of rock stars, celebrities, and athletes, including Billie Jean King, Megan Rapinoe, Tom Brady, Tony Hawk, and more. You can check out Andy's sports writing for Forbes by going to Sporty, S-P-O-R-T-Y, Frye, F-R-Y-E.com. Hey, Andy, thanks for joining us today on the Lean to the Left podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Bob.
First, tell us a little bit about your book, 90 Days in the 90s, what it's all about and how it got started and all that.
Yeah, I'm a career changer. I guess I was always a writer, but I was unfocused and maybe even lazy for most of my life. And so anyway, I worked in the business world for 20 some odd years. I'm 51 now. I got to Chicago in 94. I always took stabs at writing. And I think when you are a writer, you want to be a writer, eventually something comes out. You got to put pen to paper or maybe even fingers to keyboard now, I guess we might describe it as. And back in 09, I started blogging about sports, and 8 of my friends would read it, what I wrote, because I guess I begged them probably, or, hey, I wrote this thing about the thing we were arguing about last week. Yeah, and I just sniffed out opportunities. I was in sales and business development for a long time. When I guess I got enough, I thought I had enough chops to pitch some things to editors. When you go from asking people for money to invest or to buy something, you an editor, like getting a no email from an editor is not going to, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to make you question the whole thing. I just tried to put some things out there. And yeah, in July of 2011, I wrote my first article for ESPN after kind of knocking on the door for a couple of months. And fast forward to there, I think when you get a chance to publish your writing, you always want to keep it going and see if you can best yourself. And in the background, if you are a writer, whether you write poetry or you write, I don't know, sports, nonfiction, or who knows, whatever, you write about aviation, doesn't matter. Yeah. You decide that you want to see if you can write a book. Yeah, I can go into the details about what 90 Days in the 90s is about. But basically, I just wanted to write a book about the music that I loved in the 1990s. And I've always been fascinated with generations and a little bit with history. I don't believe that time travel can actually happen. I'm not a physicist or anything, but I thought I've had this running joke with my best friend is a writer. He lives in the Pacific Northwest, used to live here. He's a short story writer named Doug Milam. And we used to have this joke about just like, hey, we should hop on the CTA train and go back and check out Hendrix's last concert. Or wouldn't it be great if we could do this, do that? So I think probably the 15th time I had that thought in my mind, I was geared up to write a book. I was listening to some 90s podcasts, and I just literally was walking by the beach up in Traverse City, Michigan on vacation, and just started taking notes on my phone. Oh, this would be cool. What about that? I'd have to include this. And I made the deal with myself that day that, and some writers do this, if I care about this thing in 2 weeks and don't get bored, I'm going to actually try to see if I could write about it and turn it into a book. And yeah, I was still interested. At the start of June, I thought, I don't know how to write a book, but I'm going to try it. I think the idea for the story at least sounds fun to me. Yeah, it took a while, but I wrote a book about a woman who's a record store owner. She's about my age, Gen Xer, nostalgic about a lot of things. And I weaved it in with that I guess my generation is maybe having our version of a midlife crisis, and weaved in with that. And she goes back to the 1990s and does a life do-over, but then she's faced with whether she wants to stay back in the good old times, if they are really that good, or come back in the present, just deal with their life as it is. Yeah, it's a little John Cusack, I guess, but it was fun to write. And it's based in Chicago, where I live, which is why the train is behind me. It's the, I guess you call it the L train line called the Gray Line. And it's all about music and maybe making amends and time travel back to, if it was not a better period, it was definitely a darn good period. So that's where it came about.
Okay, I got it. You know what? You live in Chicago. Chicago is a wonderful city, wonderful music. I used to, I had a magazine client that I worked for. I was the editor really of it, but I was not based in Chicago. I was based in Washington, D.C. And I would travel to Chicago a couple times a month to get this magazine put together. It was a monthly trade magazine. And that allowed me to enjoy the city. And I used to really love going to a little club called the Underground Wonder Bar. And did you ever hear of it?
I think I've heard of it referred to as the Wonder Bar. I got here in 94, so I'm not sure if we're talking about the same eras. A lot of things closed right after I got here. But yeah, I can't say I've been there. What kind of music are we talking though?
It was jazz and blues.
Okay.
Yeah. A woman by the name of Lonnie Walker was a piano player, and she owned the bar with her husband. And it was just a great little dive. It was, you had to go down some steps. It was, I guess that's why they called it the Underground Wonder Bar. But it's there on around Rush Street and State, I think. Anyway, I just throw that out. It was just a great little place. I don't know if it's still there or not.
I'll do a search. Maybe I'll walk around. I don't go down the neighborhood anymore as much ever since when I moved here, that was tourist bars. And I was in IT for a while, and we would get these consultants in they're always from St. Louis, and they're always there to rescue the project. If they're there for 2 or 3 weeks, by the end of it, they're like, we're going to go down to Chicago. And then when I was probably almost 30 at the time. And of course, they asked like the 20-year-old at the company, like, where should we go to go downtown Chicago? And they tell them to go to Division Street, where it's like, they're going to get hit on by sleaze bags. They're going to drink overpriced, crappy beer. And I was like, I would always go to them afterwards, be like, don't listen to what that kid said. You want to go here, you want to go here. What kind of food you want? Don't go to the touristy place. But things change, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Neighborhood changed, I'm sure.
Your books about the 90s and about music in the 90s, that decade brought us the Gulf War, a recession, Bill Clinton, the reunification of East and West Germany, the launching of the Hubble Space Telescope from the space shuttle, and the birth of the internet.
Yeah.
But what about the music of the 90s? What about the music? What is it about the music of the 90s that captures people?
I think it was, so we all, if you take a survey of music history in the 90s, whether you're watching a CNN documentary or picking up something that Rolling Stone or Spin published, it's always started with Nirvana and their first full-length album, Nevermind, which was put out by Geffen, and the single Smells Like Teen Spirit. And also, I think you got to give credit to the video on MTV, had a very iconoclastic sort of kids in a high school pep rally they don't want to be at. And then all of a sudden, hell breaks loose, and they're just like, the kids suddenly, the cheerleaders have to have tattoos, and Kurt Cobain's smashing his guitar around. And I think there's more to it than that. I remember, so I went to college in the 90s, went to high school in the 80s, I graduated in 1990. So in the spring of 1990, some things were starting to happen, like the Pixies and The Cure had been out. So the alternative thing was starting to happen. Madonna's single Vogue was blowing up. So pop was still alive. And it was the first time that Madonna evolved into, oh, here's a new thing that she's doing that's she's not faking, and it's work. It was all about authenticity, I think. Mm-hmm. And other than besides Guns N' Roses, the biggest hard rock band in the world was these 4 black men from New York City called Living Colour, who had dominated the rock charts. So I told you that we were going to get away from airbrushed, polished corporate rock stars for a while, and the sort of pseudo-decadent hair metal that was more pizzazz. There's some bands with good albums and good songs, but a lot of it was about show. And I think I can't really say that a switch completely flicked at one point. We tend to think that it did. So the music went from showy, big Los Angeles record company label, here's what we think you want to see, to, hey, here's 3 guys in a band or a woman lead singer doing her own thing, like Alanis Morissette, writing songs in their terms, playing their own instruments, writing their own songs. And if they feel like wearing a t-shirt and jeans on stage, that's the way it's going to be. And that's the real them. So I think it was all about authenticity and variety and really diversity. And I use that in terms of all kinds of music were big in the 90s, where you tend to think about it as grunge, but you had singer-songwriters like Lisa Loeb and Alanis Morissette doing their thing. You had new evolutions of punk. You had just weird bands that never would have made it definitely not now or any other time, like Fishbone or the Beastie Boys coming back and doing their thing. That it was just all about authenticity. And I think, yeah, it fed off of our socio-political system, and people just kind of wanted less BS in the 90s. And I think we got some of it. We also got a life without as much pizzazz and glam and corporate stuff shoved down our throat, at least at first.
Yeah. How would you compare that to today's music?
So I have a 17-year-old, and I live in the city, so I can't speak for all Gen Zs, but it seems like they are like us, more curious about music. You can jump on Spotify, you can jump on Apple Music right now, and if someone tells you about Sun Ra, he was a jazz artist who sung about nuclear war, you can jump on and see what that sounds like and see if it sounds interesting to you. My kid and his friends, I just took my kid to his first real punk show. I saw the Subhumans at a little club. So there's the old punks were there. I was there. My kid and three of his friends are there, and they're 15, 16, 17. And these guys are like 65, and they're slagging off the Queen and going off about companies that want to just use your labor, not pay you enough. Like, all the old punk stuff is still there. So what I'm seeing from the kids is that there's a curiosity. And then, so there's this supply demand thing that is happening, and that some of it is bands that have been around for a while, like L7 and the English Beat. They're still alive. They still have a living to make. They're not going to put out a record the same way they did 25 years ago, but they'll tour 30 cities. They'll get people like me to pay $65 a pop to go see them. Sure. And you have bands influenced by them. So I think it's not in a bad way, a rehash of what we saw in the 90s now. Obviously, there's as much gratuitous, empty pop as you want. But Taylor Swift is taking over the world right now. And, of pop bands, she a couple weeks, maybe a week ago, she brought on this band that is her favorite band, this band called HIJACKED. It's three women from Southern California who play their own instruments, write their own songs. And I'm not going to pay $1,000 to go see Taylor Swift. But the point is, she writes her own songs. It's a little different. She plays her own instruments, but she brought out this band that she likes that was more small scale than her, well known, but not as big as Taylor Swift, to come out and represent her and say, this is the kind of music that I like, that I want to share with you. They're the real deal. She could have easily had the next wannabe Ariana Grande open up for her, but I think authenticity and interest in different things is back. I don't know that music is ever any different than it was before, but it keeps renewing itself. And there's a whole lot out there for someone who wants to explore something just besides what they stuck on the radio for you to listen to.
Okay, I want to move a little bit into baseball, but before we do, I want to give you a chance. If there's anything else you'd like to say about your book, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. So 90 Days in the 90s is a story about Darby. She's a record store owner. I think, like, the way that I wrote it, at least I hope the way I wrote it, was you don't have to be into the same type of music that I am or the characters are to enjoy it. There's a lot. I think I'm just fascinated with pop culture in a way, and I included a lot from various decades, so that you don't need to be an expert on Rage Against the Machine's catalog or name even one of their songs to enjoy it. I try to make it really relatable. And I think the characters are a little quirky and funny. I'll tell you, there's a couple of movies in the 90s that I saw. Pulp Fiction is an example. When you watch Pulp Fiction, you're hanging out with Jules and Vincent. You're not just watching the movie. I'm not a gangster, but I felt like I was riding in that car with Jules and Vincent after the stakeout. I think before I thought about doing that and writing a book, whether I discovered it or not, was those kind of movies influence people of my generation. So we're all about the experience. And I think what I tried to do when I thought it out was write this book that you feel like you're hanging out with the narrator, who's a little opinionated, and the main character and her friends. And you're trying to make an experience. So I think if you're interested in pop culture at all, or history, or contemporary history, I think 90 Days in the 90s is a good fit. And if you don't know anything about music, maybe it's just a good beach read. And
I read part of it in prep for this discussion today, and I saw that you weave in the Chicago Cubs a lot.
Yeah. The thing is, there are a lot of people who don't care about sports, but we all know there's never presence of sports. So yeah, I think maybe I'll relate that to my experience. After I lived here a couple of years, and I stopped fighting the urge to recognize that the Cubs were up the street. And that was part of the reason I couldn't park my car, because there's no spaces on the street. And that I want you, even if you don't, I guess unless you're a Sox fan or a Brewers or Cards fan, you step in Wrigley Field and you just get that you're at an altar for baseball. So there's a whole, I guess maybe relating it to my book, there's a whole experience thing. You're not just there for a game to eat popcorn and hot dogs and count the strikes. Like you feel like you're visiting, I don't know, like a place that has a tradition. What I'll say about Wrigley Field is, okay, so you don't have to be into country music, but if you visit the Grand Ole Opry, you're like, wow, you get it. You're like, this is hallowed ground. That's what I think Wrigley Field is, and that's maybe why, more of the reason why the Cubs are involved in the book than anything else.
I have to tell you, I've been to Wrigley Field a couple of times, and it's been a while since before they built the stands out in left field that are
the Sheffield Avenue.
Before that. But anyway, I felt that way. I felt like I was in some kind of a baseball cathedral when I was there. It was an incredible feeling.
Yeah, good.
With the history of that place and the great teams that have played there and the stars from days gone by. And the Baltimore Orioles is my favorite team, and they had a pretty good series with the Cubs not long ago.
Yeah, even though it's new, Camden Yards, for what it's worth, is designed to be like a cathedral. Yeah, it's only been around, I don't know, 20 some odd years, but they did a better job than Reinsdorf and the Sox did when they just basically threw up some concrete and uncomfortable seats and bad acoustics, White Sox Stadium. So maybe the White Sox fans gripe about that one. But yeah, there's something to be said about going to a place you enjoy being present at to do something you like to do as well.
Yeah. The Cubs are having a good year. As of today, they're 65-60 for second place in the National League Central. Are they going to make the playoffs, you think?
It's tough because the season ended today. I was looking at the standings today that there would be a tie between basically we did this a couple of years ago where they have one game to figure out who's going to go to get the wild card. They'd have to play the Diamondbacks. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to keep winning. They got to beat teams that they should beat, like the Tigers. They lost last night and they won. I guess they won the other day. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to come down. There's going to be no shortage of them playing the Reds and the Brewers and everybody else in the division. And that really decides it more than any other sport. When you get to the end of the season, you're not messing around about who should go to the playoffs. It's not like the NFL where the Seahawks got to the playoffs with a 7-9 record, I don't know, about a decade ago or so. Yeah, I know they stocked up. They got a couple of decent additions. Seems like everybody's picking somebody off after the trade deadline off waivers now. Yeah. But we'll have to see. I hope so. It's going to be difficult unless they just somehow bowl over the Brewers in the next two series that they have with them. It's going to be a squeaker every day. So if they win, if they keep winning. So I can't give you a prediction. I want to see them stay in it, but we'll just have to see a month from now.
Yeah. You write about money in sports, right? That's what you do for Forbes, correct?
Yeah, actually the vertical is called Sports Money, by the way.
Sports Money. Okay. All right, cool. So what are your thoughts about the disparity between the large market and the small market teams and their ability to compete in today's world?
It depends on what sport you're in, how, I guess, acute it is. I follow English League soccer too. And a couple of years ago, Leicester City won the league. They looked like they were going to keep, they just kept winning. And they had a couple of stars, but they're beating all the big giants. And it was the whole time that it was happening, everybody kept saying, we're probably never going to see this again, or not for at least 20 years. This doesn't happen. It's usually the big clubs with the big money that can build a big stadium tomorrow if they want a bigger stadium tomorrow and buy a player from a team in Spain or Germany, whatever. I feel like baseball and Premier League soccer are the most capitalistic of sports in that there's not really a salary cap. There's a salary cap with teams that you pay a penalty, but it's not like the NFL and some of the other sports where you can only really spend so much. And then sometimes you see teams, particularly small market teams, spend it all on a quarterback who doesn't work out, and then they have nobody to block him. But the Chicago Bears have done that too. They haven't really been a major entity since they won the Super Bowl. The 85 Bears won the Super Bowl, and we're approaching 40 years on that, and put a lot of stock into Jay Cutler, and they had nobody to block him. I didn't think Jay Cutler had the best attitude among athletes, but he was getting tackled a lot. I don't know, but yeah, there's disparity, but then there's like the Green Bay Packers, like Green Bay, Wisconsin is not a huge market. Wisconsin is not a huge market, but you've got an ownership structure and a tradition and maybe a lot of people with their heart in the right place. And, the dedicated fans just didn't show up yesterday. They've been there for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
You can't say that they won Super Bowl 1 and 2. So that set the tone. That was a long time ago. That was 50 some odd years ago. So I think there's got to be a level of consistency and competence, which is a rarity in any business, much less sports, that has to come to play and be consistent. and have people who are just not just self-interested to really make it work either for a big or a small franchise. Sorry, that's a big like economist answer, but yeah, for every time one of my friends would say, oh, it's unfair because the Yankees and the Dodgers and Arsenal and Chelsea and Man United and they always win because they got a lot of money. Well, the Dallas Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since the 90s. And Green Bay has been good all the time, pretty much. They haven't had a bad season here or there, but they're not in a major market. So we can look at it both ways. It really depends on who's running the show and how long they've been there and how much.
It does depend on who's running the show.
Yeah.
And in the case of the Orioles, I mentioned they're my favorite team. They're having a breakthrough year this year after years and years of being in the doldrums.
Yeah.
It's happening largely because of young stars. They're bringing athleticism and talent and excitement. But the other day, team owner John Angelos threw cold water on the future by saying the team can't afford to offer these young stars long-term contracts. Is that a mistake, do you think? We'll hear what Andy has to say about that when we come back from this short break. So stay with us.
I think so. It's, the way that it used to be in the 90s, and this has happened more in the NBA than other sports, is that when you wanted to trade a player, you start talking about how great they are if they're at the end of their contract. I remember the Sacramento Kings just wouldn't shut up about how great Jason Williams was, their point guard, because they wanted to price him to get rid of him. I think the flip side is going on now where you have a lot of owners that really don't want to spend. You think the whole point of rebuilding was not just to rebuild, but then to continue to build. But yeah, I think, I listen to Keith Olbermann, who talks about baseball a lot, and didn't like one of your announcers just get suspended for saying that the team lost against the A's a long time ago or whoever it was. And I don't know if I don't know much about your team owner. It seems like he's maybe minus the racism. He's got about as much competence as Mark Schott does. Some days of the week, which is at least hire a comms department to speak for you before you piss off fans. I would say that's number one. I don't know what it's like to be a baseball team.
That's a good idea. What strikes me is that a team like Baltimore, and they've now in I think their fourth or fifth year of being considered having the best farm system in all of baseball.
Yeah.
All right. So they've got these young stars that are doing really well, and other teams would like to have those young stars.
Yeah.
The owner is reluctant to protect those stars by giving them long-term contracts. So what's to prevent them from trading those kids, getting more young stars for them, bringing up the ones that they've got, and going through this whole cycle, just churning these people around?
Yeah. And the Cubs won the World Series, a lot of it was on the strength of some trades, but also the Cubs then had the best farm system. Yeah. We had actually Candelario, and I remember there's a long time ago that Chris Bryant was a prospect. And so we just brought we got Theo Epstein to come in and bring some people and build up the farm system. I don't know what your owner is doing, but it could be this gamesmanship. He could be trying to say, some of these guys who are still on contract who you can't pick up on waivers, next year we might want to deal on them because we can't afford to pay them. But if you give us a starting pitcher and 7 prospects that we like, maybe we could, that's probably what's going on. If they make the big assessment that he knows what he's doing. I don't know. I guess the farm systems are, when you build them up and make them, you really have some good coaches and you have good players come out of them. It's hard to, 1 or 2 players is going to break that. When you just pilfer the whole hen house, then you got to start over. And that's what the Cubs are. Right? Cubs were about a year or 2 ago. So who knows? The thing is, so a lot of these owners, if they don't talk and share information, or they talk out both sides of their mouth, depending on what ulterior motive they have. Yeah. Who knows? If it's just 1 or 2 or 3 players because they want to get many things in exchange for letting them go before their contract's up, I guess that's not. You can second guess that, but maybe those are good moves. It really depends. I don't know that any of us can see inside the clubhouse or the farm system enough to know really what's going on when you have an owner who's double talking and does weird things. But I guess we'll see. Hopefully they'll win a bit in the postseason and maybe get to the World Series, and that may become addictive. And it's then a matter of, okay, if we have to get rid of somebody or price out of the market to keep somebody, then who do we replace them with, or how many prospects do we get to keep the system going? Yeah, it really is. I'm fascinated with the economics of sports and then how different sports are, but how opportunistic baseball is in the farm system and how entrepreneurial NASCAR and golf are. I mean, I could probably talk your ear off about all the sort of different underlying things that affect the game that we watch on Saturday or Sunday. So, yeah,
All
your
right.
guess is as good as mine. You got some dice, we'll roll them and you make some picks, I guess.
My last baseball question for you is, what do you think about the changes made by MLB, like the pitch clock and the ghost runner and all that kind of stuff?
I like him. I think baseball fans are a little bit nostalgic, and maybe that's why that's in my book too, but and tend to be the average. I think the average age of the baseball all-star viewership, at least last year, was like 59 years old. So then we think that there's some big aversion to change of anything. But I haven't heard anybody complain about the pitch clock. I think it's sped up the game in a good way. It's put a little bit of pressure on the pitchers not to. There's been a couple pitchers over the years that have just. There's one reliever for the Dodgers who used to take like 2 minutes for between every pitch.
No,
To the point, I think Vince Scully was complaining about it on a broadcast of a playoff game one year. I think it's all positive. Sometimes tension causes the production to be a lot better. You think about you just put constraints on things, and sometimes you get better results. And I think that's why it's worked so far. And those changes were good.
Yeah, okay.
That's my opinion.
I did have one other baseball question I forgot to ask. What's your prediction for the World Series? Who's going to be in it?
I think Atlanta's going to make it again. I don't know. They just seem to be too deep. They've been in first place most of the time in the NL East, and the Phillies can come back up. But I think they're probably going to win it. The AL is more of a guess because look at the Texas Rangers record. It's great, but I just don't think they're going to. I don't know. I don't think that the Astros are going to stay down and let them just have it. And I don't think that they don't really strike me as suddenly as powerful enough team to get through the postseason unfettered. And then I'm still a little scratching my head about why the Orioles are so good and can they hang on for the next, say, 5 weeks on that. But then again, you got like an AL East with 4 of the 5 teams have a above 500 record. And the Yankees in last place, the only ones with the losing record. A week goes by and a couple teams do a couple screwy things, and all of a sudden the math has changed and the wild card is all over the place. And so it's going to be like who makes the wild card, who wins the division, who makes the wild card is going to predicate that in the AL. But I think Atlanta is probably going to be too tough to beat in the National League. That's just my opinion. And I think the Cubs I want the Cubs to make it to the postseason wild card, but it's a tall order. Ask me in 3 weeks what I think on that, but they're not going to get through Atlanta this year.
All right. You've interviewed a bunch of sports stars over the years. You were telling me a little bit a while ago about Billie Jean King and some stuff that she had to say. You want to share that?
The cool part of writing for a sports business magazine, because it's not like I have a Rolodex of agents who return my call 2 minutes later. A lot of times I will get pitches from publicists, and sometimes they're all over the place and out there, but a lot of times they come with, particularly with retired sports stars, they are doing things, they have ownership stakes, they got business ventures. So a lot of times it'll be like Star X is invested in this business. I got before I talk about Billie Jean King, I got one of the bigger ones of the last couple of years was I got an email about Tom Brady. Tom Brady starting an apparel line. And basically the emails, here's our press release. We know you're interested in Tom Brady. Go write an article about it. So I responded with 2 sentences and they just said, yeah, it sounds great. If I get Tom Brady on the phone, I'll definitely write an article about it. I thought he'd get blown off. They come back about 2 days later. Yeah, we can get him on the phone for 10 minutes if you write about this and this and mention his brand. I'm like, as long as I can talk about football, and I'm probably going to be like, what I always ask them, and I ask Billie Jean King a lot of this, is what do you have from the sport that's relatable to what you're doing business-wise or foundation or social activism or whatever? Because I'm interested in the competitive mindset. So I got to interview Tom Brady because he was starting a new brand. And it was like, you were under Coach Belichick. You don't know. I know you don't know as much about textiles as your designers do. So how are you coachable and how do you work with them? And they come up with really great answers that are really gifts as far as a writer goes to include what they have to say about why they're doing this. So with Billie Jean King, she's done a couple of things that are social activism related. She's got a gig with Johnny Walker, the whiskey brand, the Scotch brand. They put on these panels. They put on a panel during the World Cup a couple of years ago, and they got me to speak. And Billie Jean King was attached to something that they were doing that was similar. And I got an offer to talk to her, and Yeah, man, I was supposed to be on the phone with her for 10 minutes and she talks more than I do. And we were on the phone for 25 minutes and here comes people come on. They're like, so she has to go in a minute. And Billy's just, no, we're talking here. It's cool. And then she's, oh, so where are you? And tell me about, she's actually interested in what I had to say about certain things and what my opinion was. And the second time I got to interview Billie Jean King, it was the daytime, it was the Friday of Serena's last ever match. Because she was going on that night. So it was like 2 p.m. And she's, oh, are you here? I was like, what, you in Flushing Meadows? Like, no, I'm at home in Chicago. She's, oh, it's too bad. Because we could get a drink or something and talk about like side talk political stuff and, you know, how you and I agree what politicians we hate. She implies a little bit of that. But yeah, she's a talker. She's hilarious unintentionally. She'll laugh a lot during your interview. You see the pictures. I'm looking at a picture of her now on my wall here where she's got a racket. She seems really serious and intense, but she enjoys life. She's definitely out there to enjoy life and she'll tell you about it. Some of these people you just have a conversational thing with where you ask them questions, but it's just like talking to your cousin you haven't seen in a couple of years. And that's what I enjoy about it. That it doesn't matter if it's a rugby player, a tennis player, a golfer. Like most people they just want to have a conversation with you. If you're a journalist, they want to see that you're not going to ask them a whammy question to try to catch them off guard. And then I think they like it when you are just a normal person with them and you're not intimidated by them. And I mean, I've gotten to interview some of the best names in sports. Pretty much everybody I've wanted to interview except Michael Jordan, LeBron, and Serena. Dick Schaap because he's been deceased for 20 some odd years. All the other people, for the most part, that I've wanted to interview, I've got to interview or pretty close to all of them. So that's pretty fun.
That's cool. I had an experience one time. This has, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a side track here, but I was asked by a client to pick up their main speaker in a car, in a limo. And the main speaker was Henry Kissinger.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's sitting in the back seat of this limo. I'm sitting in the front, and we're talking. We're just going to wherever it was he was going to the hotel where he was going to go speak. I think we picked him up at the airport. And
you didn't pick him up at the Watergate, I hope.
No, all he wanted to do was talk baseball.
Okay. Yeah.
He didn't want to talk about any of this shit that he was going to say before this business group or any of that thing. I'm all prepared to give them the lowdown on the group and what they want to hear and all that kind of thing. He didn't want to hear any of that stuff. He just wanted to talk about baseball, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, the first time one of the first people I interviewed when I switched over to Forbes was Johnny Bench. And it was, long story short, in 2018, baseball decided to have every team play on opening day for the first time ever. So there's some great commercials. There's a commercial that I saw where Johnny Bench is cold calling baseball fans. Are you going to be there? Yeah. So I decided that it was like a Thursday, Friday. I'm like, I bet if I find the publicist who's doing this, if I stalk them for a couple of days, maybe I'm going to at least ask them if I can get an interview with Johnny Bench. This is like long before all the people that I've talked to you about that. Now I've interviewed like 50 different major sports stars. In the beginning of that, before I had done any of that, I didn't know if I was going to get a response. And they're like, yeah, we can get him on. And he's going to talk a lot about barbecue, just so you know. He's going to talk, and he talked about his, like, I think he's single again. He basically said, I've got my boys live with me and I fire up my grill, and he lives in South Florida, and I get my grill as hot as it can be. I get the hot dogs and burgers, so I get my kids out of the way, and then I do my steak the way I want to. And he had a special rub, and he wouldn't tell me what was in it. He wouldn't even tell me, he wouldn't give me the recipe, but he wouldn't even tell me what was in it. And then he's talking about how he uses his air fryer for like different sides. And I was averse to the air fryer forever. I just used it to make some mahi tacos for lunch. So I get the whole, like, I don't like the word foodie, but you know, whether you're like Italian, like I say that the food that I make is peasant food because I don't follow recipes. I like a lot of spicy garlic. I'll send you a bottle of my favorite hot sauce. It's called Quanda's. It's made by a drag queen in Brooklyn. I like just mixing things up. And so when I talked to a Hall of Fame baseball player, we talked a little bit about being a catcher, but we mostly talked about food. That's cool. Pretty awesome. Just talk about tacos and steak.
That is cool.
I can't really complain too much about.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the O's game the other night and on MLB TV, and there was an ad with this little old lady. She's in her kitchen. She's making a strawberry pie. Yeah. And she says, I like helping people. Sometimes all it takes is a piece of pie. And so anyway, I saw this strawberry pie. I thought, I think I'm going to make a strawberry pie. I went online, got myself a recipe. All I needed that I didn't have was some strawberry jello. So I went to the store and got some strawberry jello and some whipped cream. Man, I made this strawberry pie. It was fabulous.
Nice job.
I just finished it yesterday.
My mom used to get books by the Charleston Cake Lady. I think she goes by the Charleston Cake Lady. I don't think she's alive anymore, but my mom was doing she's a nurse practitioner, consultant, and she was in, I want to say like wherever she lives, Savannah or not Savannah, like Columbia and I'm going to look up the Charleston Cake Lady and just tell her I'm a big fan. And she met her. I think she went to her studio kitchen and met the Charleston Cake Lady, who like talked about their son. They talked about, I don't know if they talked about me, but they talked about their sons over a slice of cake, which is like her shtick, the Charleston Cake Lady. So yeah, someone's famous or accomplished, like you make a connection with them, reach out to them. Like people are just people. And
Right.
I thought you were going to tell me that you made that strawberry pie and it didn't work out, but maybe you follow recipes better than I do. So
Actually, I did follow the recipe and it worked out pretty well.
I don't bake. You got to
The
follow the
recipe
recipe.
is really simple. It's like 4 steps, not hard. And now I'm going to try to adapt that same recipe to a peach pie. I love peaches. So I want to make a peach pie and I'm going to try doing the same thing. Anyway, now the last thing I wanted to do was to move a little bit into politics. You said you had some thoughts about Russia and Ukraine war. Tell me about that.
So when I live in the city. I've lived in the city ever since I was in 1994, and I have a lot of obviously very socially liberal friends. Like I was pro gay rights, not to say like before it was cool, but maybe it was a generational thing. Certain things you just knew were going to change, but maybe generationally, like we grew up in the shadow of the Cold War. I'm fascinated with the Cold War, but yeah, it's weird because we can have conversations about this all day long. That all the things that Biden is doing to support Ukraine, if he was a Republican and if Reagan did it or George Bush 1 did it, would he be nominated for the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize? But it's weird. It's just, I don't know. Maybe this is like me coming back from writing my time travel novel. I'm just like, why are we at a place where Republicans are pro-Russia or don't care? We have I went to college in Ohio, and Kentucky's just over the line. And to hear, what's his name? I call him Ayn Rand Jr., Senator Rand Paul, say that Ukraine's just part of Russia just blows my mind that we're there after 60 years of NATO. And I think it's going to continue to go bad for Russia. I'm interested to see now that I can't pronounce his last name, but the head of the mercenary group Wagner went down on a plane today. And I wonder if Putin signed his own death warrant with the loyal members of the brigade, maybe going to cause some problems there. But a lot of my friends are very like liberal, peacenik, war is never the answer. And I agree with that to some degree, but I also wonder if we're at a place where, when if it doesn't go too badly, we don't end up with a nuclear war, that we, have to treat Russia the way that we treated Nazi Germany after 1945. You got to, I don't know, split up the country or occupy it somehow, or even just put in some things that are major constraints to keep them from doing it again. And ever since Putin's been in power, Russia's been a threat in small forms and big.
All right, last thing I wanted to ask you about is the presidential sweepstakes and the Trump indictments. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Trump indictments, it seems like it's been going too slow for too long. I'm not a super fan of Merrick Garland. Put a beer in me, I might call him milquetoast Merrick Garland, because I don't really think that he's done.
Yeah, I agree with you. I
think we're all the place where we fear that democracy's at risk and justice doesn't mean the same thing that it used to. And that plays into that when we're dancing around with somebody who on any given day will say we need to start a civil war. Yeah. But it's interesting to see Trump and the other guys turn themselves in Georgia and have to be booked. And I guess we'll see if we get a mugshot before the end of the week of Trump. But I think that all the underlings, the other band of the 19 indicted, I'm wondering who's going to plead guilty, who's going to deal. If you are somebody that we've never heard of before, you're Jenna Ellis, or you're somebody who doesn't have millions of dollars, how long are you going to build up legal bills just to stand by your man here? So that's going to be the interesting part, and to see who flips. And I don't know.
They're all bitching they're not getting any help to pay their legal bills from Trump.
What did you expect?
Of course.
Trump didn't even really pay.
He doesn't ever pay his bills.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing I love it when I studied economics in college as a part of my study, and I always love it when, first off, when people make this argument that, oh, I can't hire workers for a restaurant because nobody wants to work hard because they don't want to work for $2 in tips when they get a job at Amazon with benefits for $20 an hour. Capitalism is treated like this thing that's only benefiting, I guess, wealthy people. Yeah. Same thing with, it's just Trump never paid his bills. And if you're for small business, why would you ever think about supporting this guy? He's stiffed over 3,500 different businesses that have sued him. And that's not really a way to run a business. And I'll get back to sports. If you're buy golf properties and you're losing $10 million a golf course a year, like he Turnberry, I'm guessing you probably shouldn't really be in the golf grounds business. But that seems like more of a sweepstakes than the presidential thing, because I don't think any of these people we're going to debate tonight are going to go anywhere. There are going to be some interesting things out of Chris Christie's mouth potentially. And I think Nikki Haley's just going to be a corporate, just spout the things that you expect her to say. And other than that, the only other interesting thing is that Trump's almost 80, or I guess he's 78, something like that. He definitely doesn't look as healthy as you or my dad. What happens if he drops dead in the middle of this? What do we end up with? A bunch of weak GOP candidates who are going to say nice things about him and assume, I don't know. It's so unpredictable, yet we're used to all this drama and craziness.
Yeah. All right. So lastly, where can people find your book and how can they learn more about you, my friend?
Yeah, I go to andyfrye.com, or if you want to just check out the book, it's on Amazon. Obviously, if you're shopping for Q-tips, you can just type in the name of the book, even spelt wrong, and it'll come up. If you don't want to get Jeff Bezos more dumb-looking cowboy hats and you want to buy from your local bookstore, they can order it just like anybody can. Or if you want a signed copy, just go to 90daysinthenineties.com. I'll sign a copy and send it to you. Or you got a friend or a dad or a brother or sister or anybody who's diehard into music or pop culture history, it's definitely a good gift, I think, for that. I've had a lot of people buy the book for their Pearl Jam loving uncle or their sister who loves Melissa Etheridge, and they just want to read about the good old times again. Yeah, I say go independent, order from me or for a bookstore. But if you're on Amazon, it's there too. It just really depends on how you get your books.
Okay, and don't forget, when you go online and you put in Andy Frye, it's Andy, Frye. There's an E on the end, so you got to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Andy, thank you very much for being with us, pal. It's great talking to you. I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good talking to you.
Now one more break, and I'll be back with some closing comments, so stay with us. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you'll come back on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that I hope you find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. Our episodes stream weekly, every Monday. Let your friends know about this podcast and take a minute to subscribe. Just go to podcast.leantotheleft.net to subscribe, check out the upcoming interview schedule, and listen to all of our episodes. And follow us on social media. Facebook at the Lean to the Left Podcast, Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at BobGaddy_Lean to the Left, and TikTok at Lean to the Left. And you can watch the episodes at YouTube at Lean to the Left. And don't forget to visit our blog site, leantotheleft.net, where you'll find commentary on the news by some excellent writers with progressive perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member there, and of course, it's all free. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.